I'm Joanne Cook with Keller Williams Premier. I hope you are having a glorious day. I'm setting up this video today to talk to you a little bit about this little guy right here, the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. We want to talk about what it is and kind of go over some of the different aspects in it. You might have come across this little guy um, while having a conversation with an agent or somebody that you know who's a broker. And hopefully they may have brought up in conversation the different types of agency and what their job is or what their responsibilities are to you. This little brochure, though, I think can be one of those points of contention. This little bugger can kind of be awkward to talk about and when to bring it up in a conversation. It's sort of funny how it gets handled. It's sort of one of those things where you're in the middle of trying to talk to somebody about what you're interested in and about selling your house, or maybe you're just sort of having a casual conversation about maybe buying and considering what you're looking for in a new home. And yet you might not realize that what you're sharing with an agent is actually confidential information that, believe it or not, at that point, your person that you're speaking to, the agent or the broker, should maybe kind of say, time out. You're telling me some really important information. Maybe it's neighborhoods or the school you want Johnny to go to, and that information um, is actually confidential. So before you jump in and tell me any more, I'm going to stop the conversation and we're going to break down what agency is. I think that's really great and important. It's a great flag or red flag if you're talking to an agent or a broker and they don't do that. And that's a great little sign that, hey, wait a minute, are you going to ask me or tell me about the different kinds of agency before we go any further? Um, and that way you know that you're really working with the right person, somebody who is following the rules and who is going to go over information with you in an honest and straightforward way. So let's jump into this little brochure real quick over the next couple of minutes and break down what the different types of agency are and how those relationships are going to affect you. All right. I think most people are probably familiar with the first two. You've got a seller's agent and you've got a buyer's agent. And that's kind of straightforward, right? A person who is selling their home wants somebody who's going to look out for their best interests, who's going to be loyal to them, who is going to follow all of the laws and make sure that as a seller, I'm following the rules and the laws going forward as I sell my home. You want to make sure that they are providing you with all of the material facts and that they're doing all the due diligence possible and necessary to hopefully get you the best price selling your home, right? And of course, the same goes on the other side with the buyers and the buyer's agent. The, the buyer side, that person is helping you buy your home, is also looking out again for your best interest at all times, working really hard to help you get the home of your dreams in your price range and not sharing that confidential, that private information with any other sides, with the seller side or the seller's agent, right? And part of being the seller's agent is that you get to help set the commission rate, because generally, usually, that commission is paid on or through the seller's side. The buyer's agent typically, not always, but typically does not collect the fee in our state, in the state of North Carolina where I am. They're not going to collect the fee directly from the buyer. They collect their commission through the seller or through the transaction on that seller's side. There are a couple of caveats to that situation and to that rule. And if you want to know more about that, definitely ask your agent or ask me, and we'll go over it together, what those couple of caveats are. Okay. Now, there are three other types of agency. So we had seller side, we have buyer side, but there's three other types of agency situations, and they can get a little confusing. So let's break those down. The first one is the situation where the seller's agent works directly with the buyer. That's similar, but not exactly the same as a dual agent. So those are two, right? The seller's agent who works with the buyer and a dual agent. So let's break these two down first, real quick. When a seller's agent is working with a buyer, oftentimes what is happening here is that the buyer has chosen not to have an agent represent them directly, or they're working with a company or a firm that may not necessarily offer buyer's agency. In this case, the buyer, the person buying a home, is actually working with the seller's agent. Why is that important to you? Is that the seller's agent is, at the end of the day, responsible and looking out for the best interest of the seller and not necessarily the buyer. Although they certainly are required to be honest and fair with you and make sure that they have given you all the material facts, their job ultimately is to make sure that the seller is protected and cared for. Um, the second half of that is dual agency. And dual agency, people confuse the seller's agent working with a buyer. They confuse that with dual agency a little bit. When you are a dual agent, both sides, both the seller and the buyer, know that they have the same agent working for them. This can be a little bit of a sticky wicket, I think, a little bit of an ethical tug of war, especially if you're trying to get the best deal. This situation works really well for people maybe who are family or people who already have sort of an understanding. They're probably not going to spend a lot of time negotiating back and forth, and they just want to get the paperwork done. So they're using a dual agent in that situation. Um, but if you're using a dual agent and you're definitely in that negotiation process, then that agent is walking a tightrope between looking out for the best interests of the seller and looking out for the best interests of the buyer at the same time. Both sides have contracted with one agent. It can be difficult, but it's not impossible for the agent to do. Um, you just want to make sure you have a deeper conversation again with your agent if you find yourself in that situation. All right. But the last one is actually good. It's called a designated dual agent. We have all of these agencies, dual agent, designated dual agent. This is actually completely different than the seller's agent working with the buyer or dual agency. And a designated dual agent is where you're in a situation where you're actually working with the firm. Think of the firm as the company that you're aware of. Maybe that company is Keller Williams or Remax, or I don't know, it's a small boutique firm called Over the Rainbow Realty. But essentially, the firm is the company, and then you have all the agents who work under the company. And so in this situation, perhaps as a buyer, you work with one agent at Keller Williams, or I work for Keller Williams, so I'm using Keller Williams as an example, but you work for one company at Keller Williams, and the seller of the house that you really like is also with Keller Williams. In this situation, all you're agreeing to is that your buyer's agent, who is looking out for you, works at the same place as the seller's agent of the house you might really like. And these two people, they're not going to share any confidential information with one another, and that they are really just working for one company so they're working under the same roof, so to speak. Um, And they're at the same place. So basically, the breakdown of the different types of agency there, you want to make sure that you have questions about that, about the different kinds of agency, um, or that you have any concerns, that you bring that up to your agent and you have a conversation about it. And of course, lastly, that agent at the end of the day, the conversation is going to ask you, hopefully, to sign the back of this little brochure, this little guy right here. And all you are signing here, there's nothing official about this. It's literally just a little receipt at the back of the brochure. And the reason that we're asking you to sign this is that we are required by law to show proof that we've had a conversation at least once with every person who has shared some sort of private, personal, or confidential information about their situation with us. Also, I have to keep that little receipt for my records, my permanent records. What we find though is that, and especially myself included, I love to do things digitally. The digital version of this does not look, let me see if I have it here on my screen. Here we go. It's exactly the same thing, but the digital version looks absolutely nothing like the paper version. In fact, it looks kind of official, but just know it is not a contract. It is not a legal or official document of any kind. It's simply a receipt that says, that you acknowledge that yourself, myself, or another agent has had a conversation with you and that you were able to ask questions and that you understand the different types of agency. Um, and so by signing this, it takes a second. If it's digital, it's literally one click um, or a quick signature that just says, yep, so and so had a conversation with me. Thanks a lot. I know what y'all are talking about now. Um, And that's really about it for agency. And I hope that you have found this little video helpful and informative. And if you have any questions, or you or anyone maybe that you know is interested in buying or selling, please reach out to me, Joanne Cook, Keller Williams Premier Realty. And I hope that you have a really wonderful rest of your day.